Hello and welcome. This is False Start, a college football podcast for everyone and everyone else. I'm your host, John Buhler, staff writer, fanside.com. I'm joined today by nobody because sometimes January gets the best of us. Yeah, Cody Williams is not going to be available today for feeling like death reasons, but hopefully we'll have him back on the program on Thursday to help us preview the national championship, which will be coming to you guys semi-live with 3 yards and a cloud of punt on MLK Day night after the conclusion of Notre Dame and Ohio State. But yeah, should have a pretty fun episode today anyway. Maybe a little abbreviated, still going to do the same 6 segments here because I planned for it. Because we have 31 subscribers, we're going to make this Chick Stick the Long Ball theme. You know, my favorite commercial. It's one featuring 2 Atlanta Braves legends, Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine. Try to show off their ability to hit to impress Heather Locklear, who thinks Mark McGuire's the bomb. Well, I don't have a Tom Glavine or a Greg Maddux shirt. I have a Chipper Jones shirt, so I'm going to wear that today. If they would have it, it was the first thing up in the closet for me. So, you know, at the tender age of 35, that's just how we roll here. So, yeah, let's get started here with our first and 15 or step into it. Yes. Hey, we got Cy Young winners over here, or we got NIL winners over here. We're gonna do some talk portal to me about Carson Beck going to Miami. Yes, Georgia starting quarterback of the last 2 years, Carson Beck, initially entered the 2025 NFL draft, but for NIL, bad draft grade, and girlfriend reasons, he decided to remove his name from the draft and transfer to Miami. Bias aside, this is a pretty good move for him to potentially extend his college career, recoup some of the draft capital he had lost by throwing a lot of interceptions to a Georgia receiving corps that wasn't all that good. This is an opportunity for him to go and play in a new system under Shannon Dawson. I don't think trading out Kirby Smart for Mario Cristobal is really good, but he goes to a slightly easier conference. And one thing that Carson Beck has shown is he can beat Clemson. This is something that you need to do to win the ACC. Something Miami I don't think has ever done since they moved over from the Big East. But it shows that Miami is willing to put out the NIL resources to compete with the likes of the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Ohio States of the world, Texas, if you will. Again, Carson Beck is from Jacksonville, and so I always kind of felt more of like a guy who was in Athens, not of Athens in some capacities. This is a move that I think allows him to achieve many of the dreams he wants that he didn't think he could do at Georgia. I don't think you can win a national title at Miami, but if you have a great season, you can be a Heisman Trophy finalist like Cam Ward was, and you might be able to go number 1 in the draft like Cam Ward is expected to. Again, a year ago, Cam Ward went through the same sort of thing where he initially declared for the 2024 NFL draft out of Washington State, pulled his name out, and then transferred to Miami. This is a year that I don't even know if it's the year that Miami has to get it done. It was supposed to be last year, and they didn't do it. They lost to Syracuse, a game that Cody and I forecasted would happen quite easily. So this move by Beck certainly sent shockwaves throughout college football. Everybody thought he was gone. People like Todd McShay were dumping on him for entering the draft anyway. I thought it made sense. Look, if you're done with one place, you've graduated, you're free to go. I mean, he played his tail off there for Georgia. I'll always give him that. A very fantastic, accurate passer. Threw a lot of picks, though, but a lot of them weren't his fault. Fit the Boba system pretty well. Obviously, I think he came in initially to be a Monken guy. Monken left to go be the Ravens OC when he took over for Stetson Bennett at quarterback. Obviously, Beck was a mega talent. He was a guy that we thought could be like the next Matthew Stafford. He was probably closer to Aaron Murray, but again, 2 damn good dogs that I remember watching when I was in college, and a peer of both of them. So I think this move signifies 2 things to the rest of the college football world. One, it makes Georgia even more of a player in the transfer portal, potentially in the spring. Maybe now, if Quinn Ewers decides not to enter the NFL draft, we'll see what happens there. All signs points to him probably doing that. But like, if one of the Texas quarterbacks decides not to go to the NFL or Manning decides to leave, that's an opportunity as well. It also puts a lot of faith in Gunnar Stockton there for Georgia. Look, this is a guy that Kirby Smart, Mike Bobo, and the rest of the staff have a lot of belief in. And I tend to think that, it might work out. Uh, there were things that Stockton showed in the Sugar Bowl that I liked. It was his first career start against one of the hottest teams in the country, Notre Dame, and Georgia didn't really have an answer for that. But the fact that they went out there and they got Zachariah Branch, they got Noah Thomas to amplify the receiving core, it's going to give Stockton a much easier time to develop. And I think more importantly, Bobo's offensive scheme, a scheme that he was supposed to play for when Bobo was the OC at South Carolina, he's going to simplify it for him. And I think a lot of things with Beck was, mega talent, NFL, every bit the NFL prototype. I think the offense was a little bit too complicated, and I think that really slowed down the receiving core a little bit. Didn't help that the offensive line was a little bit banged up and that the defense was kind of inconsistent at times. It did get better as the season went along, but I think a simplified offense is going to really do the best thing here for Georgia, if you will. As far as Miami is concerned, I think this makes them player to contend for the ACC again. And prior to them getting back, I was kind of out on them. Like I was like, okay, who's their quarterback going to be? I mean, Cam Ward is great, but it was close. It was close, but no cigar. So, where do you go from there? And as far as like, is this enough to overtake Clemson? Is this enough to fend off SMU from being back in the playoff again? What about the Louisvilles of the world? I think it makes Miami interesting. I think it puts them in the same category of those teams. Maybe teams like, I don't know, Georgia Tech seems to be trending up a lot. Duke looks to be pretty good. The ACC is going to be very competitive towards the top third and half of the league, but then again, at the bottom, you're still going to have the Stanfords and the Wake Forest of the world. I think Florida State will be better. It has to be. Why would it not be? They went 2-10 the year ago, which is a complete outlier. And we've seen some really bad Florida State teams in recent years, but that one took the cake. So back to Miami certainly keeps Miami on the radar, keeps them inside of the top, 25, 15, 10, wherever you really want to rate the Canes. I think Beck certainly helps out Miami to achieve a lot of the goals they want to do. But I also don't think this is the end of the world for Georgia. Look, for all intents and purposes, everybody kind of knew that this was Beck's last year. He wasn't going to come back for his sixth year to the same place. If he was going to go to college for 6 years, it was always going to be somewhere else because, like, six years one place is a long time. And I wish he would have been able to achieve all that he wanted to at Georgia, be the first overall pick, win the Heisman Trophy, win the national title as a starting quarterback. Just didn't work out. Football's hard. Life's hard. But even though I think it looks kind of dirty that he's just leaving for money, obviously his popularity is kind of waning. The Miami fit kind of fits for him. And wish him the best of luck here. And I'd like to see him have a fantastic season in the ACC, do the best he can, except when he plays Georgia. So that's kind of how I feel about that with, step into it. And we got NIL deals over here. So we're going to move on to the next topic here with some, what's next topic? It's, come on, Alice. Yes, you're doing great, sweetie. I mean, I just pull up the notes tab here as opposed to looking over the other screen. You're doing great, sweetie. Brian Ferentz is taking over to be a part of Matt Ence's first staff at Fresno State. This is the worst offensive coordinator I've ever seen. This is a guy who's benefited from the fact that his dad's Kirk Ferentz for his entire professional career. It allowed him to go to Iowa, play at Iowa, play in the NFL for the Falcons and Saints in two very forgettable seasons, to go be on Bill Belichick's New England Patriots staff, to come back to Iowa, to be elevated from tight ends, line coach to play caller. And it was so bad that Beth Getz, the athletic director, the one who was initially the interim who took over for Gary Barta, asked for him to leave. Kirk Ferentz is still there, still doing Kirk Ferentz things. He's been in this job since 1999. Maybe that's not the best thing for the world, to be honest with you. But so I totally forgot that Ferentz ended up being an offensive analyst on Mike Locksley's Maryland Terrapin staff. And just because Mike Locksley got an interview with the New York Jets doesn't mean he's good. I mean, he's a good offensive play caller, but it kind of comes and goes as a coach. He has no idea what he's doing on defense. And for the most part, when it comes to the Maryland Terrapins, they turtle up once the weather changes. So they'll have a great September, really bad October. And if they can reinvent themselves in November, maybe they make a bowl game. They went 4-8. The only team that they beat in Big Ten play was USC. Well, guess where Matt Ince was working? He was working at USC on Lincoln Riley's staff. Look, I know that Matt Ince had a lot of success there at North Dakota State, but the Iowa of it all kind of brings this all together. I believe he's from Waterloo, Iowa. So again, in one of the biggest cities or towns in Iowa, knows the flagship university quite well. I don't think he played there. I think he played in Northern Iowa, if I'm not mistaken. But the opportunity to get a guy who's well connected to a program that you respect, I understand it. And look, Brian Ferentz was a good position coach. Tight ends, offensive line, that's kind of like the blocking sort of component. That's what the Ferentz's bread and butter is as coaches. But when it comes to play calling or getting the wide receivers involved, it's Greek to them. They don't know what it is. They don't know what half the symbols even mean, and it really leads to a really poor offense. And everybody outside of Iowa, I mean, I guess everybody in Iowa pays a price for it. Everybody else in college football world thinks it's funny. So Iowa's kind of become a joke because of these two men. But look, Fresno State was a team. I believe Tim Skipper was the interim. He took over very late in the summer for Jeff Tedford, who resigned, retired, whatnot for health reasons. And Fresno ended up going to a bowl game. I thought they would give Skipper a little bit better of an opportunity to be the full time, but it just didn't work out. But it's is a guy that I think that the university had its eyes on, so I totally get bringing him in as well. But for me, I think this is an interesting place to monitor for the group of five next year. Look, I know Boise State kind of ran away with it this year, and but Ashton Genty's gone. Dirk Cutter's retiring. So you've got Spencer Danielson and Maddox Matson, two guys with a lot of experience in these big games now, but not the two dynamic guys like JT and Cutter, if you will. So I think really outside of Colorado State, who's trending up, I mean, who's going to be good in the Mountain West? I think UNLV will be decent. I mean, Dan Mullen's taking over for Barry Odom. We'll see how that works. I don't think UNLV is going to fall off a cliff, but like they may pull back ever so slightly. But Cody really likes Colorado State to potentially win the group of five. I forget who I said. I like Miami, Ohio with Daquan Finn going back to the MAC after spending a year at Baylor. The former Toledo legend goes to a rival team in the MAC. So I kind of like the Red Hawks there with Chuck Martin. Um, but I see what you're trying to do here with Fresno State. You're trying to add kind of a bigger, I don't think the word is a more global reach, if you will, because you're not just competing with the guys in the Mountain West or the Pac-12 or wherever you end up playing eventually. You're competing with every team in the group of five for a playoff spot. And I think that that's going to help teams like Fresno State, Tulane, whomever, South Florida, like level up even more. It's like the recruiting there is going to intensify. And I think Ferentz has always been able to get good guys to come play at Iowa. They always had NFL talent there. It wasn't always developed to the most degree, and outside of linemen and whatnot. But I think for the most part, having a guy whose stock is completely depreciated coming in and joining a staff in a position coach role, it's not the end of the world. I mean, these guys are football minds; they got to work somewhere. But I will say though, for the most part, it's nice to see Ferentz finally get away from his dad again, or Bill Belichick. We'll see what happens with Fresno State moving forward, but for the most part, like it kind of caught me off guard. I'm like, oh, I totally forgot that he even like was an assistant at Maryland. I mean, it's almost as though like the Iowa offense improved probably because Brendan Sullivan played pretty well at quarterback and Tim Lester knows what he's doing. Maryland's got worse. Yes, Talia Tagovailoa are out of eligibility, and Brian Ferentz came in. The Big Ten picked up four former Pac-12 teams, so that kind of created a wrinkle in all this. But like maybe everywhere Brian Ferentz goes, it gets worse. Just like everywhere that Kevin Warren leaves, it gets better. Whether that be Arizona State, whether that be the Vikings, whether that would be the Big Ten, maybe the Chicago Bears, but they don't know what they're doing. And neither do the Iowa Hawkeyes, and this is false start. So yeah. That's how I'm kind of feeling there about you're doing great, sweetie, with some come on Alice with Brian Ferentz going to Fresno State. Next topic. How long are they going to worship this guy? It don't mean enough. Yes, we're going to talk about Arch Manning, Steve Sarkisian, and just the Texas of it all, if you will. Reading the tea leaves here, We've gotten a lot of traffic, I mean, on fanside.com over the last few weeks. Anything to do with Steve Sarkisian, Arch Manning, and Quinn Ewers is just, it's going crazy. I think the fact that Steve Sarkisian had been tied to NFL jobs through Jay Glazer's report for Fox Sports is a big deal. I think that Steve Sarkisian, when he was the offensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons, he did really well. I mean, he was only for 2 years. Then he went back to Miami. Dan Quinn replaced him with Dirk Cutter. Didn't think that that was the best move at the time, but again, Dan Quinn always identifies himself with really good coaches and business coordinators. Look at the Commanders winning last night with Cliff Kingsbury and whatnot, calling the offensive plays for Jaden Daniels. Um, but I think Sarkisian, we saw in the Cotton Bowl, fourth of Sark reared its ugly head as the field shrinks and the time ticks off the clock. He gets in his head, and then you end up doing some stupid like quarter halfback toss or some sort of sweep play, if you will, on first and goal from the one to stay in the game versus Ohio State, and then fourth and whatever, Quinn Ewers got sacked by his former roommate Jack Sawyer on a strip sack, took it the other way, and Ohio State's playing for the national championship, and not Texas. Yeah, they're not coming back to my town. Oh God, it's gonna be weird seeing Ohio State Notre Dame fans everywhere here in about a week. But maybe we won't have snow. We'll see what happens. But so we've got Steve Sarkisian being tied to the NFL. We've got Quinn Ewers wondering if he's going to stay or go, turn pro, transfer. You've got Arch Manning saying, I'm staying at Texas, but there's also the allure that maybe he transfers in some capacity. Here's what I ultimately think happens. And I could be totally wrong with this. I could be wrong with this right now. There could be news breaking and we have no idea. I'm gonna monitor the Slack channel. Okay, we got nothing in there. I think we're okay. Then again, Cody's not on today, so maybe nothing's in there anyway. So Steve Sarkisian's going to stay. I don't think that there's enough of a serious threat for him to go take an NFL job. At this juncture, the only team that I think he would take a job for is if the Cowboys opened up. And I don't think that that's going to happen because Jerry Jones likes control. He'd rather give Mike McCarthy another extension than actually hire a head coach who's going to challenge him on anything. I think the other teams are too far along in the process to really bring in Sarkisian. We saw the New England Patriots hired Mike Vrabel, so the best candidate's already off the table. Um, so that leaves us with the Bears, the Saints, the Jets, the Jaguars, and the Raiders. I wouldn't be shocked if a college coach eventually took one of these. I mean, we've seen Deion Sanders tied to the Raiders gig. We've seen Steve Sarkisian's name be mentioned. We've seen Marcus Freeman's name be mentioned. We've seen Matt Campbell's name be mentioned. We saw Mike Locksley's name be mentioned. There are coaches in college football that I think could translate to the NFL. Maybe one of them, maybe all of them, maybe none of them. I don't know. But I have seen Sarkisian coach at a high level in the NFL and have success. Too bad Dan Quinn Stevens couldn't play a lick. And I will say, like, I would be shocked if Sarkisian left Texas before Manning does. So I think Manning's going to stay as long as Sark's there. If that doesn't happen, then he may transfer. He may go somewhere like in Alabama, Georgia, an Ole Miss, Duke, Virginia, SMU, Clemson, somewhere like that he was recruiting with or had been recruited to LSU maybe, probably not because Michael Van Buren Jr. is going to take over for Garrett Nussmeier in 2 years. As far as Quinn Ewers is concerned, it's a lot of the same teams, but I've also heard rumors about Michigan State. Oregon might be a fit. North Carolina could be intriguing. He also got recruited by Texas Tech once he was in the portal the first time. Although Zach Kitley left, I'm not saying he's going to go to FAU, but like Texas Tech could be a threat as well. I would say if Ewers does enter the portal, I know I put down Georgia's number one, an article I wrote yesterday. North Carolina intrigues me. I think the opportunity to grow and learn from Bill Belichick is too good to pass up. I don't think he's going to benefit by playing in Freddie Kitchens' offense. I mean, we saw what that did to Baker Mayfield's career and how he had to reignite that there in Tampa with Dick Canellis and now Liam Cohen. I just think that Quinn Ewers if he goes to North Carolina, he ends up really becoming a little more polished, a little bit more refined. He'll know what he needs to do in the NFL if he doesn't already. So I think that would be a huge plus for him. But I keep going back to this. Like we said this on 3 yards of the cloud of punt. Is Texas good? Was Texas great? Was Texas worthwhile? Just a frustrating team. It's the one team that made the playoff that I still have questions about. There's still a great level of uncertainty. I think that they transitioned very well from the Big 12 to the SEC. The problem is they don't have some of the glue guys are missing. Like just another year of SEC recruitment would probably do them a world of good. I felt that like a lot of the receivers kind of came over from other teams. Offensive line looked good. I think they did a great job in the trenches. I think they could have used a little more speed at linebacker. I think that was an area where they struggled stopping the run at times. The running game was hit or miss, really offensive line dependent. I think obviously CJ Baxter being out for the season hurt them considerably. So I think in time, what's going to happen is, okay, I think Manning and Sarkisian return, and I think Ewers turns pro. I think that the NIL compensation, unless he's going to get something like $4 or $5 million from some other team, he's just better served going to the NFL. I mean, like he's taken Texas to the playoff twice. He's what, 2-2 and 4 starts in the playoff. That's plenty of experience. And again, that was really the one thing that I said he needed to go back for. He needed to, for lack of a better word, get a few more starts because his first 2 years starting at Texas, he got hurt and he missed some time. So to be able to gain that necessary experience, to book more than 24 starts in your college career, that's huge. He still got injured. He still missed a few games this season. That's just who he is. That's why he's going to be the NFL Sam Bradford. But I don't think he's going to go number one. I think he'll probably go second or third round this year if he does declare. And if he comes back, again, maybe he has an opportunity to shoot himself towards the top. But then again, Beck's going to be in this draft. Drew Aller might be, Garrett Nussmeier. I don't think Arch is going to declare, but you get what I'm saying. The opportunity for him to turn pro, it could go either way, but it's going to come down entirely to money and if he wants to go play for a third team. If he does, I think the team who gets him is going to be very excited about it. He makes every team that's championship caliber, like a Georgia, like an Alabama, like an Ole Miss, sustain. And he's going to take teams that are not quite there, whether that be a Michigan State, a Texas Tech, or a North Carolina. It makes them better. So I think Ewers staying in college for one more year is good for the sport, is good for whatever team he plays for, just not ideal for Texas. And from there, I think it puts a lot of pressure on Arch Manning and Steve Sarkisian. Manning came to Texas to play for Sarkisian. I understand that AJ Milwee was his primary recruiter and whatnot, but like if not for Sark, he's not there. So I think what Sark's going to do is going to simplify the offense. He's going to make it a little bit more running centric to accentuate some of Manning's skills a little bit more as a dual threat. He got that from his grandfather and his dad, not his uncles. It's like that perfectly clear. But I think if you're thinking he's going to be running the same offense that Quinn Ewers did, you and I are sorely mistaken. That's not happening. So I feel as though the partnership between Manning and Sarkisian is not done just yet. If it is, I'd be shocked, and that's going to send shockwaves to not only the college football world but to the NFL as well. So, how long are we going to keep worshiping these guys? For as long as Texas is kind of sort of back, if you will. Moving on to our fourth topic, we're making hella good time today. Yes. Hey, have you guys seen Mark or Marcus? I'm going to put Marcus Freeman in the slot because I think he belongs there. This is a guy that entering this season kind of had in the hot seat in some capacities. This is a coach that I felt, for lack of a better word, got in his own head a little bit. I kind of felt that he got promoted too soon. He was playing and coaching with Brian Kelly's players in a very difficult job in Notre Dame. He's likable. He's been likable the entire time. But obviously, You have the losses to like Marshall and Stanford in previous years, obviously Northern Illinois at the start of this season, which what an outlier. That's going to be a trivia question for a long time. Should Notre Dame win the national championship? Who was their one loss to their the 2024 national championship season? The Northern Illinois Huskies and Thomas Hammock putting one down in the boneyard. Yeah, that was then. And this is now. But I feel with Marcus Freeman, he's very easy to root for. He's very handsome guy, very strong defensive mind, knows how to put good coaches around him. I think the fact that he's able to retain Al Golden as his defensive coordinator, and then I think also being able to bring in Mike Denbrock from LSU to help get the most out of Riley Leonard, even though the offense isn't anywhere near what the LSU offense was a year ago. I think that that helps. I think that in time we need a little bit more of continuity there because you had two new pieces coming to a new place. I understand that Denbrock had been at Notre Dame before, but this was Riley Leonard's first time being in South Bend. He had been at Duke before. And I think we also saw Steve Angeli go in there and throw the ball pretty well when Riley was in concussion protocol. Maybe he's a quarterback next year for Notre Dame. But as I sit here with Marcus Freeman, he's got everything that I think college NFL teams want to build a team around. Look, I'm of the belief that you cannot win a national title in college football if you have an offensive gear head coach. You need to be either defensive minded or you need to become a CEO type. Because at the end of the day, the teams with the better players are going to win more often than the teams who execute the best. For example, let's say you've got a bunch of five stars out there and they're executing at a B minus level. That still might be better than a bunch of three stars executing at an A level. And more importantly, there's a larger margin for error where let's just say the five stars are executing at an A minus level. They'll beat pretty much everybody unless there's playing another team with five stars and they execute at A plus. You get what I'm saying. The advantage of having better players is you can run simpler concepts faster in college football because it's not a league driven by parity because the best team's not punished and the worst team is rewarded like it is in the NFL. You can create separation. You can create gaps between you and your competition, league designation, whatnot. Um, Whereas if you're an offensive minded guy, you become beholden to your playbook. It's like my plays versus my guys, and your ego takes over. You get cute with it. You call something that's you think is going to work, but then a team with better athletes is just going to blow it up. So, because Freeman's a defensive mind, former Ohio State linebacker, had a cup of coffee in the NFL for a few teams in 2009. He's got the defensive minded background to it. He's served under Luke Fickell, he's served under Brian Kelly, and now he's thriving in Notre Dame. I find it quite interesting that he's elevated this quickly. We talk about like the pop years and everything like that, where if you got the right head coach at the right program, it usually pops halfway through its second season. But I think Notre Dame's a little bit different here. The reason I feel that way is, well, first off, it was already doing well under Brian Kelly. Like this was a top six program in the first 10 years of the college football playoff. They made it a couple of times. They didn't win a playoff game, but they made it. Notre Dame has had fantastic players in the trenches, tight end. They've got a bunch of guys drafted, and maybe not necessarily the best skill position guys outside the hash marks, but like Notre Dame's been an ever-present part of college football, since Brian Kelly took over. Um, but obviously Marcus Freeman's been able to like sustain that and honestly build upon that. I think he's made the team a lot more likable. It kind of feels like Brian Kelly was the John Voight character in Varsity Blues, and none of the players like him. And I'm not saying that like the late Paul Walker's like pretending to be coach with like a cast on and crutches, but like Marcus Freeman kind of feels like one of the guys, even though he's pushing 40 and these guys are 20 something years old. As I as I try to process this a little bit more with putting Marcus Freeman in the slot, this has led me to believe that like maybe the NFL is his future beyond Notre Dame. Um, I don't think it doesn't matter that he doesn't have any NFL experience. I think he's just got the trust and the buy-in of his players. I think what he does translates to the next level. I think the team he was tied to the most throughout the offseason process may have been the Chicago Bears due to relative proximity with Notre Dame kind of being in their backyard, if you will. But I think the team that probably should consider him at some point is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I wrote about that for fanside.com yesterday during the NFL playoffs. It's a prompt that a Steelers fan, Mark Powell, put out there. And this is one I'm like, okay, I can actually get behind this. It's just, it's just I'm trying to think of the word is it's just like outside the box enough to work for the Steelers. Look, they've had like three coaches in like 45 years or something like that. I don't know, 50 at this point. Chuck Noll, Bill Cowher, Mike Tomlin. All three of them were kind of hired in very interesting circumstances. It wasn't like they were, I believe, like Chuck Noll was like on the Cleveland Browns staff or the Baltimore Colts under Don Shula or something like that. Bill Cowher, I think, was with the Kansas City Chiefs under Marty Schottenheimer or something in the early 90s, whatever. It doesn't matter. And then Tomlin, I think, was with like the Bucks, one of the Tony Dungy kind of guys. But I think Marcus Freeman kind of checks that box of like he's defensive minded, very strong culture, can lead men. And I think more importantly, he's young. So like if Freeman were to take over for like the Steelers at 41 years old, he coaches for the next 15 years, retires at 56. That ain't bad. He might win a couple of Super Bowls doing that. But in reality, I think that like what he does, where how he's just so cool, calm, and collected on the sidelines in the interviews, I think that's going to go a long way for, just the perpetual chaos I've seen under Mike Tomlin. And it's a far cry from Brian Kelly screaming himself Tom Coughlin purple on the sidelines. There's different ways to coach, but every coach thinks that their way is the best. And not that you need to fail like Pete Carroll to reinvent yourself and truly find who you are, but I think that in this day and age, you're not coaching Gen Xers anymore. You're not really coaching that many millennials. You're starting to coach Gen Z. So you kind of got to be able to be in tune with the players that you're coaching. You got to be more relatable. You got to be able to be like fun. You got to be in tune with things. And I think Marcus Freeman does a fantastic job of that. I mean, he's got a bunch of players, got a wife, a ton of kids. He has a coach though that I feel for whatever reason, if it goes bad, people will turn on him just because they think that like he's gone back to his old ways of poor clock management and what have you. But like he's going to remain likable. I just feel that like again, he's a very easy guy to root for. It's been very hard to root for Notre Dame if you're not Catholic or from the Midwest or Indiana or you watch NBC a lot. Like Atlanta, Georgia, no, you usually like an SEC team if you're not Catholic, and if you're Catholic, you probably still like an SEC team over Notre Dame. That's just how it goes. But Freeman has me finding Notre Dame a lot more likable, and I can't believe I'm actually I'm actually saying that. So for that reason, for him making Notre Dame likable, for him winning three straight playoff games, honestly, I think he won what like 14 straight games, longest winning streak in the country. Because I mean, like Oregon lost, and everybody else has lost multiple times in the playoff this year. You guys are playing fantastically. This is it's really impressive. So yeah, there's no other person to put in the slot other than Marcus Freeman. Moving on to our penultimate topic here with Phil Bigger. Yeah, let's talk about some Big Ten energy. I've been wanting to have this conversation with Cody, but I'm just going to have it here because I think it's worthwhile. This was not the best year for the SEC, so I think the question is like, is the Big Ten catching the SEC? And I'm going to be diplomatic about this because obviously it's slightly biased. I'm an SEC guy, grew up in the South, went to Georgia. I mean, obviously you've got what Georgia, LSU, Georgia legend here with Hines Ward, and then obviously a new addition here thanks to the Arizona State podcast. I'll go with the Braves cap celebrating the fantastic year that was 2021. The Big Ten is catching up. I don't know if they've surpassed the SEC. They've caught up in the sense that the coaching is really good. They've caught up that they've brought in a bunch of really strong teams from the Pac-12. I think adding the likes of Oregon and Washington, and I guess USC and UCLA to some extent have improved the conference. I think that the increasing TV deal that they're going to have has really made it a power two more than a power four, and certainly not a power five anymore. By having that, every job in the Big Ten is now insanely coveted. You look at Indiana, for example. Indiana was 3-9 2 years ago. They couldn't throw the ball. Tom Allen, we think, is a fantastic coach, great coordinator for Penn State, too qualified for this, overqualified for it, but not, but couldn't do a look of anything offensively. You bring in Kurt Signetti from James Madison, and Indiana's making the playoff at 11-1. I don't think the Hoosiers beat anybody good, but they were well coached, and they took advantage of the soft belly, the soft middle of the Big Ten, and yes, you lose Curtis Rourke. He runs out of eligibility, but you made a fantastic transfer portal pickup, getting Fernando Mendoza from Cal, joining his brother Alberto there in Bloomington. That's going to be well. That's going to be really good for Indiana and everything like that. I think the fact that Brett Bielema is making Illinois very good is big for the Big Ten. I feel like we're going to see Michigan improve under Sherrone Moore. He got better as the season went along. Got to get the quarterback going. Maybe it's maybe Bryce Underwood's the guy that really unlocks things for the Wolverines there. We think that Michigan State's going to trend up under Jonathan Smith. Whether or not it's Aiden Childs or Quinn Ewers or whomever playing quarterback for them, that remains to be seen. We're due for a Northwestern pop year. Rutgers is still a bowl caliber team. They did lose their defensive coordinator Joe Harris-Simiak to UMass, but Greg Schiano and Piscataway, I like that. Iowa's not going away. Nebraska's trending up. I mean, the only two teams in the Big Ten that I don't feel good about next year are Wisconsin and Maryland because I think Luke Fickell's in over his head and Mike Locksley just doesn't know defense yet. So that's a challenge as well. Um, but I think the big thing that I go back to is yes, the Big Ten was 5-1 over the SEC in the in bowl season, but like I think it was like something like seven Big Ten teams didn't make a bowl game, and all but three made it out of the SEC. So 13 compared to 11. In most years, I sit there and I think like anytime the SEC gets all but three of its teams into a bowl game, that's huge for the league. That essentially means that their bottom can beat some teams' tops. Like they're going to go out and handle business in non-conference play. It also means where I think people are missing the boat here. When you got teams at the bottom who are winning games that they shouldn't have to become bowl eligible, like like Oklahoma beating Alabama or Oklahoma beating Ole Miss or Alabama or whatever. The Oklahoma, the Floridas, the Vanderbilts being bowl eligible. That tears away at other teams that could be playoff caliber, like Alabama, Ole Miss, A&M, what have you. I think that we need to see the Big Ten's bottom be as compelling as the SEC's. And I know we're not moving the, no, I mean, I know it may seem like I'm moving the goalpost here at some degree, but I don't really care. That's not what this is about. I think, you look at the NFL, for example, or look at Major League Baseball. Let's say, for example, you're in a soft division and you're just running away with it. Trying to think what's a great example of that. The Buffalo Bills, like they kick some serious tail in the AFC East. The Patriots fired their coach, so the Jets. And Miami was pretty dysfunctional this year. They kind of held on for a playoff bid until the end, but they weren't really a threat. Is Buffalo looks good. They looked really good versus Denver. But like, is it going to be enough against Baltimore, who I think played in a slightly more competitive division with Pittsburgh, who they beat, Cincinnati, who was playing really good football down the stretch. And we'll see what happens. Doesn't matter if the AFC East is better than the AFC North. You still got to beat the Chiefs out of the AFC West. So what I am really getting at here when it comes to figuring out who's better right now between the Big Ten and the SEC, there's not much of a gap anymore. It used to be the SEC considerably. The SEC cannot win a national title this year. The Big Ten could repeat with Michigan winning last year and Ohio State up for it this year. But I kind of feel like there's a lot of Maryland's, there's a lot of Michigan States on the schedule in the Big Ten. In the SEC, I mean, maybe Georgia benefited from playing Auburn, Kentucky, and Mississippi State this year, as well as next. But like, we think Auburn's gonna be a lot better. We think Mississippi State's gonna be better. Kentucky, that remains to be seen. But I also kind of feel that like, when they acquired when they got Texas and Oklahoma from the Big 12, they got the two biggest and best teams from that league. Texas was a national championship contender. Oklahoma, not quite. Whereas, like with the Big Ten getting the four Pac-12 schools, yes, we know that Oregon and Washington are elite. We thought USC was, it's not, and then UCLA was kind of the throw-in. So you're getting a larger pool. You're getting the good and the bad and the ugly all at the same time. Again, I think the coaching is good. I think this. I think there's key pieces to some of the best teams in the Big Ten that have the speed of SEC teams. I'm watching Ohio State. That's an SEC team. I watch Penn State. That's got some SEC caliber guys. Oregon, to some degree, yes. Although I think that they're forever a soft program. They just are. It doesn't. I hope that Dale could turn that around, but like it's just in their blood to you know go hibernate or disappear when it gets cold or when the going gets tough. But at the same time, I think teams like UCLA are kind of built for their new league. I feel that the Bruins massively overachieved under Deshaun Foster his first year. That's a team that I'm a lot higher on than I am with USC, which I'm not kidding. I'm going to pick against Lincoln Riley every game for the rest of his career until he's no longer coaching at USC. I'm just done with it. But I guess to really tie a bow on all of this with has, the Big Ten surpassed the SEC. In some instances, maybe there's some evidence that it's happened or happening, but we live in a world where evidence doesn't matter. It's all about reputation, and we're gonna need to see this. We're gonna need to see like 2 or 3 more years like this, which I kind of feel is an outlier for that to be the case. However, and I will say this, it's a two-team league here in college football. It's the SEC and the Big Ten. You're either ESPN or Fox. That's kind of how that goes. And even though Notre Dame can, maybe, and possibly could win the national title on next Monday night, I'm going to be shocked if it's ever going to be anybody besides SEC or Big Ten team for the foreseeable future. For that to change, we're going to need a Big 12 team to catch a few breaks, and then we're going to need the top third of the ACC to really hone in and just be ultra powerful, like we saw with Clemson there from like 2015 to 2020 under Davis Swinney, or from like what 2011 to 2014 under Florida State under Jimbo Fisher. We're going to need to see a team emerge like that at the ACC. But the truth is, we may have seen that team, and that's Notre Dame, and they're kind of like loosely tied to the ACC. So right now, I can't in good faith put the Big Ten ahead of the SEC. I know people are like, "You're crazy, you're biased, or whatever," but like I've seen enough. I can't emphasize how difficult some of the schedules some of these SEC teams had to play. Like it was brutal. Not just Georgia. I feel that like the Florida of it all. I mean, the fact Billy Napier not only got to keep his job but thrived and succeeded down the end, that's going to make the SEC even better. They beat up on each other. That's kind of what happens with like, that's why for so many years we've held the AFC North in such high regard. NFC West too, in some capacity, where like it's just top heavy. They beat up on each other, and then the AFC South sends one team in, which is not going to be the Colts. So if we're looking at it like in terms of like, okay, let's like the AFC, for example, just to finish it here. Maybe the SEC is closer to the AFC North. The SEC is the AFC North. The Big Ten's kind of like the AFC West. Maybe the ACC is the AFC East, and the Big 12 is the AFC South. So football analogies here. Got one more playoff game today. Got to figure out who's going to make the playoffs here between the Rams and the Vikings. Obviously, yesterday we saw the Broncos lose to the Bills. We saw the Eagles throttle the Packers. Then we saw the Commanders survive the Buccaneers. Got to figure out that fourth team that's going to be joining Philadelphia, Detroit, and Washington in the second round. Looking like the winner of the Rams Vikings is going to play the Eagles next round because Washington was the sixth seed and they're going to play Detroit. There you go. All right, let's move on to our final topic here with chicks to the long ball or bowling with Antonio Banderas. So we're going to recap the Orange and the Cotton Bowls with Antonio. We got one more here. I can't wait to hear what Cody says about his experiences with Antonio. So we're in the Orange Bowl, and Antonio just went down there bronze. He was in Miami. He was fist pumping the whole time. This came after he was really excited about, going to Nassau and, bronzing out there the Bahamas Bowl, and then also, playing Sparky there in the Peach Bowl for ASU. But he like me, like a lot of other people, he was really excited to hang out with Marcus Freeman. James Franklin wanted nothing to do with him. And I think the funniest part about Antonio was he was hanging out there with Mitch Jeter's dad. I think he was learning how to be a chiropractor, but he doesn't know what that means. He thinks it's like massage, and that's so he wants to learn how to massage people at at the birthday parties because again, it's not bachelor, it's birthday parties. So yeah, he's trying to learn new skills for when we go to Nashville again. Um, Again, we kept going out of Florida. I mean, there's nothing like having a Florida man down there in Florida. Like that's Antonio's in his bag, even though he was made in China, grew up in Fresno, and identifies as a Phoenician there with Arizona State, but he loves him some Florida. I think the other part was like he wanted to hang out with LeVar Arrington and double fist some Long Islands because I told him like James Franklin doesn't want to hang out with you, but LeVar absolutely does. And again, LeVar didn't really seem to understand the whole Antonio of it all, but I told him like he's here for a good time. He's like, well, so am I. And let's watch let's watch Abdul Carter play. And Antonio was very quiet, besides just saying woo, because he's a woo girl in a woo guy's body. The only thing that he kept telling me was Stick City is a place, and he wanted to go there. But I told him like, no, that's in Pennsylvania, if anything. He's like, I want to go to Stick City. He thought it was a club, and again, he was fist pumping to Pitbull and Dale and everything like that. And he also tried to take the goalpost. He saw the kick that Mitch Jeter made after hanging out with his dad, Dr. Massage. That was what he called him, Dr. Massage. And I just remember from like afar, Cody looked Antonio right in the eyes and just said, "No, no me gusta." And Antonio decided, okay, not to take the goalpost out of the field because I don't think that Antonio was going to be able to make it out because I think the big thing that Antonio doesn't realize is if you take a goalpost to a body of water, whether it's the Cumberland or Potter Lake, it's fresh water and it's not salt water. And if Antonio was going to take that, he'd be taking it into an ocean, and we may never see Antonio again. Um, I asked him like, do you know who Robinson Crusoe is? And he says he knows who David Crusoe is in Jade. So that was Antonio there on Thursday night there in Miami. So we went to the Cotton Bowl in Dallas next. And again, we were dealing with some weather here in Atlanta. Not a good time getting on the airplane. Antonio just kept going back and forth in the plane train, singing songs that only he knew. People were like, can we get this deranged, crazy blow off this train, or else we have to like put him in airport jail. Unfortunately, we were able to get a connection, get back to Dallas, and get Antonio out there in the land of Yeri Jones. And that was the other problem. He really was not interested, you know, in Ohio State or Texas that much. I know Cody was all about hanging out with Quinn Ewers and Sark. Again, Antonio, just, again, he wants to touch Sark, but it's like we already saw him. He's like, then you saw Bevo out there, and he was like bulldog, and I'm like, no, that's a giant Longhorn cattle. That's not what you want. That's not a bulldog. And he wanted to ride it, and I'm like, Antonio, you're a blow up doll. If you get pierced by that horn, there's no coming back for you. We can't super glue your hands together like we need to sometimes for you to retain air before we patch you up. So we go over there to Ohio State sidelines, and Antonio doesn't know what a Buckeye is. He thinks it's a bulldog. I'm like, no, it's a nut. And I saw him be very intimidated by seeing Brutus. He was not a fan. It scared him. It must have reminded him something terrible about recording, Puss in Boots, and that was basically what it was. He thought it was Shrek, and he did not want anything to do with Brutus the Buckeye. But again, we are in the house of Yeri Jones, and Antonio was over there dressing up in a cowboy suit, looking like a Texas fan, even though he doesn't care about Texas. He's calling Jerry Jones on the phone the whole time, and he kept getting on the phone with some guy named Mike. So I think Yeri Jones changed his number to be forwarded to Mike McCarthy, and Mike McCarthy was confused the entire time why this anthropomorphic blow up doll who speaks in Spanglish was kept yelling at him about Yeri Jones. And all Mike McCarthy said was like, I'm in my barn in Appleton, Wisconsin, trying to figure out football. But I think the good news is, oh my God, I can't believe Cody didn't. I didn't tell Cody this. Antonio is going to be paying Mike McCarthy's salary, so like Yeri Jones is not going to do it. But for Yeri and Antonio to be friends again, like he's like Jerry Jones is like, I'll do it under one condition: you're going to be paying Mike McCarthy's salary for as long as I say. And he said Bulldog, and I get there too. But yes, this was episode 142, a false start. You can follow me, John Buhler, on Twitter or the X at Buhler118. You can follow my absent-minded, absent co-host Cody Williams at the Sizzle 20. You can follow the show at CFB False Start. Like, rate, listen, subscribe, review on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, anywhere there's podcasts. Give us a 5-star review. It's not as good. It's not as good as when he does it, but like, I'm doing it for him on behalf of Cody. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, have like come up here like a spider or something? I mean, there's only so many things you can do with the 5-star thing sitting here in a chair. But yes, hopefully Cody's feeling better. I'll be back at least on Thursday. Hopefully he's joining me. Once again, thanks for listening, and this is False Start.